viewers, thanks for tuning in to today's video. Today we're going to be painting Rahman Rouhani, the medical doctor from Haqqislam, for the Infinity Defiance crew out of the core box. We've also got his little remote, and it's going to be a relatively simple paint job. Just like the rest of my speed painting videos for the game, we're going to rely heavily on contrast paints, but in today's video we're actually going to be playing around with applying contrast paints over varied base coats in order to get different results out of the same contrast paint. So let's go ahead and get down to the hobby table and we'll get started, and I'll show you how I did this. Okay, hobby warriors, we're down at the hobby table, and I'm just showing off the primed miniature. I primed it with Vallejo gray surface primer mixed with a little bit of white acrylic ink. And to get started, we're going to use Militarum green contrast paint first. And we're gonna go ahead and use this on the belts of the miniature as well as the backpack and the satchel. And now, using the same color on the remote, we're just going to pick a couple of random armor panels to go ahead and paint with the same color. As it is contrast paint, you do want to make sure that your brush is not too overloaded. You want to avoid pulling on these flat surfaces. Alright, so now we are going to use khaki from the Vallejo model color range, and we're going to go ahead and paint in the pants as well as the mini shirt in this color. And you might need 2 coats of this in order to get really good coverage. You do want to make sure that your coverage with this color is smooth, because we will be applying transparent paint on top of the pants in a later stage. And now switching over to the remote with the same color, we're just going to now pick out a couple of other armor panels. This is completely at your discretion. I ended up choosing the armor that's around his forearms, but go ahead and pick out a couple of panels in this color as well. Right, so moving on, we're now going to use Iraqi Sand from Vallejo Model Color. And we're going to go ahead and paint in the knee armor of the miniature. And then once we're done with that, we're also going to move over to the remote and apply this color to some of its armor panels. Alright, so next up we're going to work on the inside of the miniature's jacket. And so we're going to paint that with snakebite leather contrast paint. And again, with this being a relatively flat surface, you want to make sure that you control any pulling that may be happening. Make sure your brush isn't too overloaded. And if you do see some pooling while the paint is settling, go ahead and clean your brush and you'll be able to remove that excess paint. Now, moving on to Basilicanum Gray, I'm going to go ahead and use this on all of the straps on the miniature for the backpack as well as the satchel. You want to try to be as neat as possible with this so that you can minimize any cleanup that you have to do. But if you do need to do a little bit of cleanup, you can go ahead and take a white paint of your choice or a light gray and go ahead and paint over the dried contrast paint to re-achieve your undercoat. And now moving on to the remote, utilizing the same color, we're going to go ahead and paint the robotic frame that's visible in between the armor plates. Right, moving on, we're going to use Griff Charger Gray to go ahead and color in the armor plate that's on the backpack, as well as the armor plate that's on the satchel. Right, and next we're going to use Dark Oath Flesh to paint the miniature's face, but my camera died, so I lost that footage. Now we're going to switch over to Agros Dunes. Now we're starting with the remote this time, and we're going to cover up some of the previous plates with this color. So what this is going to do is put a nice transparent yellow-brown layer on top of the colors that we've already painted. but since it's translucent, it works like a filter, and it slightly alters the color of the panel, and this helps you get some nice variation, as well as also shading in some of our recessed detail for us. Now, switching over to our doctor, we're going ahead and applying Agros Dunes to all of the outside of his trench coat, as well as the pants and the shin guards. Now, on the trench coat, we're going to get the standard Agros Dunes color, and you want to control your pulling. It's okay if it's a little bit darker in the folds of the jacket, but you want to make sure that it's not pulling on any of the flat areas. But on the knee pads and the pants, it's going to act more as a filter and alter the color that we have there, away from the greens and more into the brown shade for the pants. And then it'll darken down the knee pads and do our recess shading for us. Right, and now we're going to switch over to Black Templar and handle all of our black details. Really, this is just the pistol that the doctor is holding. Now we're going to switch to a layer paint, Fire Dragon Bright, on the wrist cuffs of the jacket in the studio art. There's these little inset panels that are painted orange, and we're just going ahead and putting down that base coat. Next, we're going to move to Iandan Yellow, and I'm really only using this on the remote's eyes. It's a very, very tiny detail, and the angle of the remote's head is actually looking down toward the ground. So I didn't want to worry about spending too much time trying to paint detail that tiny, and I'm letting the contrast paint kind of do the work for me. Right, now we're switching over to Skeleton Horde, which is another very translucent contrast paint, and we're applying this to the wrist cuffs of the jacket just to get a little subtle color difference from the rest of the jacket. Alright, now moving on to Wildwood. This is a great color for painting hair on darker skinned individuals, and it's the perfect color for this application. So we're going to go ahead and paint the doctor's hair. Alright, now we're going to work on highlighting up the skin on the face, and first we're going to use Pure Bugman's Glow to go ahead and hit the high points, so the forehead, bridge of the nose, and the cheekbones. Just little dots of colors and small lines. And then for our second highlight, we're going to mix in a little bit of Sunny Skin Tone, about a 1-to-1 mix with the Bugman's Glow, and then we're going to hit those same areas with a smaller highlight inside of the first highlight. Alright, next up we're going to use Dawnstone. The miniature, the Doctor, has these cybernetic implants going from his right temple around the back of his head. And some of that implant that was on the face ended up getting stained with the skin color. So I'm just reinforcing that, as well as hitting the metallic buttons that are on the pants and on the belt. Right, so now we're going to use Deathworld Forest and a little bit of Sunny Skin Tone in a 1-to-1 mix to go ahead and highlight all of our green areas. So the belt, the straps of the knee pads that are on the pants, as well as his satchel and his backpack. Now specifically the satchel and backpack, they do actually have very tiny raised edges on some of the parts, and if you angle your brush at 45 degrees, it's really easy to go ahead and hit those and get a really nice sharp edge highlight. But for other areas of the miniature, such as the belt, you'll need to paint very, very fine lines, so make sure your brush has a good tip and that it's not overloaded with paint. And now moving over to the remote, we're going to edge highlight all of the green and greenish brown panels with the same color mix. Now with Uriel Yellow, I'm just going to go ahead and hit the center of the remote's eye sockets. And using Apothecary White, I'm going to paint the medic armband on the Doctor's jacket. This will give us a really nice recess shade. Now moving back to Iraqi Sand, we're going to dry brush highlights onto the knee pads, and this will be our first highlight. And now for the second knee pad highlight, we're going to go ahead and dry brush Ivory onto the knee pads. Now with Fenrisian Gray, we're going to add highlights to the cybernetic implants on the Doctor's head, as well as touching up any of the armor panels on the bags that have the Griff Charger Gray down as their base coat. And last but not least, we're going to use Tesseract Glow on the screen of the Doctor's pistol. Before we applied this, we went ahead and painted that screen white. Alright, Hobby Warriors, and there they are, all finished. I'm going to put a link in the cards to my basing guide in case you're curious how I went about doing their bases. Just to recap it very quickly, it's the Geek Gaming Scenics Urban Rubble mix. However, since that mix is a uniform gray color, I went ahead and put some washes over it and then dry brushed some light gray just to pick out the rocks. And then I went ahead and added a couple of Army Painter Tufts that I thought looked really, really nice with the color of the base. So with this video releasing, that just leaves one more crew member. Hopefully that video will come out tomorrow on time. If not, it will definitely be out this weekend. So make sure you check back and like and subscribe if you really like what we're doing here. And since the crew is all finished up, we're almost ready to start filming some gameplay footage. I was actually reading through the rulebook and the campaign book, getting ready to take myself through a practice game or two to get ready to film that video. And I realized I did not quite paint enough Shaz Vasti. So I'm going to rush and paint a few more Taiga creatures, as well as a couple more Nox troopers that I'll need for the very first mission. And we'll go ahead and get that gameplay footage out as quickly as possible. So if you're interested in the rest of the miniatures from this series, go ahead and hit the link up in the cards, as well as I'll go ahead and put a link to the playlist at the end of the video. And that's all I've got for this one, so I'm going to go ahead and sign out. Keep slaying the gray, Hobby Warriors, and I'll see you soon in the next video.